I am here with Vlada, the CEO of Marco Polo. Welcome to the
Hi.
show, Vlada.
Hi, thanks for having me here. It's nice to be here with you, Tom.
It's been so long. You're joining us? Where in the Bay Area are you in the Bay Area? I presume you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in Bay Area. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we met each other for the first time in Redmond, Washington.
Where's
Um,
I
can you
just
hear me
realized there's
okay?
an echo because I think I had the
Oh,
YouTube
you
open.
might have the channel open and
Yeah.
you're our one viewer.
Yeah. I just close to that.
Oh no, our metrics just crashed. I love it. Yeah, so you and I met in Redmond, Washington, working for another tech company where we wore blue badges. But maybe for those who don't know, could give us a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll kind of continue the convo.
And how far back do you want me to go?
As far as you like. I mean, like it's always interesting, I find, to follow people's kind of life arc. I feel like it's hard to separate who you are as a leader and as a product person from where your journey early days.
Okay. Well, I'll start with that then at the beginning. So I was born in Odessa, Ukraine, which of course now is a topic
Mm-hmm.
of many conversations and top of mind for me personally. I came to US in 1990 on December 25th, 1990. I
Merry
arrived to New
Christmas.
York. Yeah, I did not know about Christmas when I got there and saw all the lights, and I was thinking, "What's happening?
This magical place.
It's amazing!" Yeah. And then I learned about Christmas and that it wasn't just for me and my family's arrival. We stayed in New York just for a little while because we had some paper stuff to deal with, and then
Mm-hmm.
because we were coming to Kansas, so I was coming from Odessa, Ukraine, to Kansas, which was
Mm.
a very different place from Europe. Um, and we were just fortunate that my dad's brother was there first, so their family welcomed us in,
Right.
got us an apartment and things like that. So I was in Kansas through middle school and high school, and then after high school, I went to college at Northwestern, where I majored in computer engineering and art. I think I was the first. Oh, I know, I was the first person to do that to combine those two majors. I remember my counselor was really trying to get me to do networking or something else as another thing, but I was dead set on doing art. And then after Northwestern is where I went to Microsoft and got to
Mm-hmm.
meet you, Tom. So I stayed for about 5 years in Seattle, beautiful Seattle, and then I moved down to the Bay Area, where my husband started at the business school, and our plan was that while he was at business school, we were going to start a company together.
And
And
did you
more
do
or less,
it?
that's what happened. Yes. So while he was in business school, we actually took a class together that was on entrepreneurship. And at the end of the class, the professor invested in our idea, and so we ran an advertising tech company for a few years. And then we started having a family. And as everybody who has a kid knows, kids tend to change your trajectory in a pretty drastic way. And all the people who told me your life is going to change, and I sort of rolled my eyes. They were
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. It did change, and we really started asking ourselves the question of what does that life mean to us? How do we want to parent? What kind of modeling we want to do? And so we realized that for us, we really want to model for them working joyfully and working on something that's really meaningful to the world and to them.
Mm.
And so we quickly realized that the advertising company was not that for us. And instead, we spent time understanding research on happiness, because what does every parent want for their kids?
Happiness.
Exactly. So we just, Michal graduated from computer science from Harvard. So between the two of us, we just were audacious enough to think that if we just understood the research, we could, create very happy kids. Turns out it's not exactly the case, but that's what we thought. So from that research, what we learned was how important relationships are to happiness. That was a consistent theme.
Mm.
Every article, every TED talk was all about
Yeah.
that. Um, and so that led to our next company, which is Marco Polo. And the purpose of helping people feel close was grounded in that research that we started. And now I have 2 kids and still married to Miha, even though we've started, several companies together. We love working
I
together.
don't know how you did that.
A lot of people think we're crazy, and it works really well for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still living in the Bay Area. So that's sort of the
Tell
summary.
me, but yeah, so with so much to unpack. But first thing is, what is your sense of this situation in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine? And I'm just curious, like I see on LinkedIn a lot of people being pretty active and advocating for Ukraine. I'm wondering, like, how are you watching it from here, and what are you able to do, and what can others do who want to be helpful?
Yeah, it's definitely been a very emotional week or so.
Mm,
I'm really fortunate that my immediate family is not there, and we just have some family friends that are still there. But I have many friends of friends who are there, so my community is definitely suffering. And it's been really hard, Tom, actually. It's been like really hard to watch. And it's been also interesting to see, because I came from Ukraine as a refugee.
mm-hmm,
We fled being there, and
mm-hmm,
now coming in and seeing like that this place, yes, we did leave it for a reason. It's still a home. It was still a place, where I lived for 11 years. And to see how one person can come in and just destroy the freedom that Ukraine fought so hard to achieve
mm,
has been really hard. And quite honestly, when this conflict broke out, it was especially difficult for me because I was already jumping to the future and imagining how Kiev was going to collapse and Ukraine was
mm-hmm,
going to be taken over really quickly. But this fight that the Ukrainian people are putting up and the president of Ukraine is putting up to me, has been incredibly inspirational. And I'm seeing how it's almost like, yes, of course, I want Ukraine to win, and I don't know how they will be able to pull that off, given the difference in the
mm-hmm,
resourcing and how
mm-hmm,
much it really is a David and Goliath situation here. Um, but it almost doesn't matter because look at what's happening with the world. Like, look at that, this overwhelming wave of love
mm,
that's happening from all over the place. People are uniting in ways that they weren't united before, and rallying together. And as sad as it is for me to see what's happening to Ukraine, it's also like my heart is like bursting with love for what's happening all over the world and how people are coming together in ways that we haven't been together for such a long time.
mm,
And I don't know, for me, there's also an entrepreneurship lesson in here as well as a leader. So often, because our company is so purpose driven, and the purpose is
mm-hmm,
helping people feel close, and I focus so much on our purpose and the impact our purpose can have in the world. And it does feel like we're taking on a Goliath with all different companies out there that I think don't have the same well-being in mind as we do for the people who use our products. But it almost, like, I can see with Ukraine, it almost doesn't matter how it ends because the journey is already having the impact.
mm.
So I can see how with Marco Polo, our journey, just the fact that we're doing what we're doing, chances are already inspiring and having impact in the world in the ways that I haven't considered. And that's been really beautiful as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in the business of connecting people and in a way that's much richer than they normally might. Let's talk a little bit about the decision to start Marco Polo, because you've been on it. This isn't one of those Silicon Valley, like, oh, I went to this startup for 2 years, and then I did that, and then I got that. You've been at it for a while. How
Yeah.
did it? So you talked about some of the research you did, and it reminds me of I was reading some research on um, wellness and lifestyle medicine, and they had basically broken down like the key elements of wellness into a number of factors. One was like nutrition, sleep, exercise, stress management, substances, avoiding bad ones. And then the last one was human connections and personal relationships.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about how you went from, okay, keeps coming up in TED Talks, this keeps coming up in research, to therefore we should build what?
Yeah, so we didn't actually have an idea in mind at first. It really was the therefore was the purpose. And it actually took us a while, which I know is an unusual thing. Like most companies that I know of come up with an idea or a financial opportunity or something like that. And for us, it really wasn't that. For us, it really was the purpose of the company came first. And we took our time making sure that this was a purpose that we could really be behind for a really long time. Like we really view this as like the most scarce resource we have is our time. And so we really want to spend our time on something that's really impactful in the world. So let's make sure and spend some time feeling good about the purpose. So, and our purpose hasn't changed in all this time, and we've been at it for a while now, like you said. So, and we've iterated many different times until it got to Marco Polo. Again, the purpose has always stayed the same. So for me, that's really been an important piece. And then from there, we really, I remember we just decided that what we're going to do is we're going to solve a personal need. And every day the goal was to produce something. And it really could have been anything. We just had to produce something with this purpose in mind. And, for me, I was learning how to design on mobile. Miha was picking up how to develop on iOS, and something had to be produced. And so, sometimes it was me taking a course or Miha taking a course, and we just produce like one project based on that. Sometimes we collaborate to do something, but at the end we produce something that we wanted for our family. And then we started using it, and then we gave it to, I forget how old she was, but I had somebody who was less than a year old in my household, and I was pregnant with our other daughter already. I was doing a lot of music together classes and a lot of mom and me classes, and I was surrounded by their moms all the time. So I started asking them to try it out and started getting feedback from them. And so that's sort of like how we started the company, is like started having folks start using the products, like prototypes we put together to start getting feedback, and start making iterations on that.
When you say that you had a goal of producing something every day, do you mean like a working code, like a working feature, or it could be like a mock for an idea of a feature? Or is it literally like every day you would have something that you could play around with?
It was different for Mihan. For me, so he was coding, so he actually did have something that he would produce, like something workable every day. For me, it was often like a flow, or like some aspect of something that I was thinking about. So it was different threads.
What were the early prototypes of, like, what were these moms using? What were you giving them?
The first one, we thought it would be pretty amazing because we wanted our kid to know her family, and we thought that photos did an adequate job of really getting her, like letting her really know her family. So we thought it'd be really interesting to recreate this. Do you remember in the olden days we used to have these plastic inserts you put in your wallet and you can open it up with photos and So we thought it'd be cool to create a video version of that for our daughter. So basically it was an app. It was called Carousel. And the idea was that there would be photos of our family members, and she could, I think she was 9 months old. She could like tap, or we could tap on it for her, and the video would play from that person. And it could be like reading a story, or it could be them asking her question, or it could be like a few different things. And as a result, she would get to know their face, their voice, and so on. And as she got older, it was interesting because she actually thought they were talking to her. So oftentimes, like as we loaded like new videos on, we'd be like, "Hi, how are you?" And then she would, in her kid voice, would like say something back. Anyway, so that's what they were using. But the feedback we got back consistent, like everybody loved it for their family and their kids. But the feedback was, okay, but I want to send videos back. I don't want to just have videos from my family. I want to send them videos of my kid. And
Right.
so from there, we evolved into the next version of the app, which was Joya, which was the original app that we actually launched in the App Store. And back then, it was, this is 2012. So back then, you couldn't send videos over like iMessage because like to Android, for example, that just wasn't possible. And from Apple to Apple, you had to like use a UI to like shorten the video. Do you remember that? Like they had to be, I think, less than 15 seconds long. And it
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah. And you
it
had
was
to
really
pick.
clunky.
Right. Yeah.
You had to pick the right segment.
Yeah.
Anyways, it
Yeah.
was really clunky. So we solved that need. You can send videos of any length on any device for free. And so that's how Joy got started.
And then now I'm looking at Marco Polo on the Android Play Store, and there's 271,000 reviews, 10 million plus downloads, editor's choice. How did you go from, hey, this is a quick way to send videos, you don't have to truncate it, to this huge app now?
So Marco Polo is our 9th iteration. So there's
Wow.
been a lot of different. This is what I mean. I think it's for people who are listening. I often get this as advice, like when starting a company was something that's really important. I think the purpose is really, really important because if you really care about the purpose, then that will get you through all the ups and downs. That will get you through all the iterations. That will really unite the team. Like that means the people you're hiring, even as you're changing what you're doing, the purpose is why people are here. It's not for a specific app. Like even now, I tell people the purpose of the company is not to create a video app on on your phone. The purpose is to help people feel close, and how we go about tackling the purpose really might change over time. And especially as VR and all these things happen, like it might not look the same way as it does now in 10 years. So I really want to hire people who are thinking about the purpose of the company and having that be first. So to answer your question, how we went from that to this, 9 iterations, like I said, and a lot of customer research. We are really big on understanding our customers, talking to people who are using the app on a regular basis, getting insights and seeing how they're using it. So one of the iterations that we got to was we had this app called Evercam, and it was an app. The idea there was to help you. Again, it was about video and sharing through video, but the problem we were trying to solve was space in your phone. And so that would be a really easy way for you to share photos and feel like your moments together without worrying about space in your phone. And then again, we gave it to a group of people to use, and I'm talking to them on a regular basis to see how they're using it. And there were groups who were using it to talk to each other. Like they flip the camera and start talking to each other. And then from there, we're like, well, that's interesting. And we actually, Miha and I forced ourselves to try that with each other and to try that with other people to see if we think that that's a better opportunity, because that kind of engagement was much higher than sharing moments, So anyway, so that's how we started using Marco Polo. That's how we leaped from that to Marco Polo.
Yeah, and you talk about 9 iterations. It's not like, oh, we made 9 big updates to the app. It sounds like there were like major pivots or new kind of approaches that were pretty materially different than the previous one.
Yes. Yeah. And each one, I think we learn something from it. And then, like, it's actually interesting to see now Marco Polo is really sort of like the best of all of the different places. And I think one of our superpowers, and it's really my Mihao superpower, is that we don't stay on a course for too long if we don't see that it's not working. Like we sort of have no fear approach to like, okay, we got our learning, now let's pivot. And as a result, we have been able to have a lot of, like, we're very much a learning organization. And we're, with every single thing that we're doing, we're trying to think first and foremost, what can we learn from it? Like whether it's an experiment or a new project or whatever we're taking on, like how can we learn from it quickly? and then apply the learning to the next thing that we're doing.
So as an example, when you went from, hey, I've got this thing that's going to save space on your phone to, hey, I want to make it easy for people to talk to each other over video, what was a subsequent pivot? Because just to help people understand, or how this evolved.
That was the main pivot. So
That's
from
the
there,
one that takes us to now. Okay, and then what are you thinking about for the future, or what can you share that you think is really interesting?
yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm always thinking about like the purpose, helping people feel
Uh-huh.
close. And it's been interesting that even right now, there's like a million, I don't know, exaggerating probably with a million, but there's a lot of ways to stay in touch. And people are
Mm-hmm.
still saying it's so hard to stay in touch.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking about is how can we get people to stop saying that? Not because they can't say that phrase anymore, but because they're actually feeling so close that there's no staying in touch. Like if you think about people you live with,
Mm-hmm.
there's no staying in touch. You don't stay in touch with your spouse or your partner or your kids. You just sort of know, maybe because she left the cabinet doors open, or left the clothes, or your kids left their socks on the floor. Like you kind of know they've been here, or you know what they
Mm-hmm.
eat for breakfast. There's no staying in touch. So, and I think technology is now to a place where we could create this sort of magical space where even as we're far away from each other, we could create this experience where you can feel like you're close to somebody even if you're far away. So ultimately, that's where I want to get to. And the first thing is to sort of erase the distance between time and space, and to allow people to have face-to-face interactions with one another that feel like spontaneous and friction-free. And for people who do use Marco Polo, it doesn't feel like work because you just talk whenever you have a thought in your mind. Person is there, great. They can listen and talk back. But if not, great, no problem. They'll get to it when they can.
So for those who are like, they might kind of understand what Marco Polo is, like, what is your quick summary of the app today? Like, how does it work, and what do people do with it?
Yeah, at the surface, I think if you just look, like I said, at surface, it looks like a video chat app.
Mm-hmm.
Asynchronous video chat app is what I think is the easiest way to describe it. But I think once you start using it, it really truly feels magical for folks. Like we've done research that actually shows that after using Marco Polo for 2 weeks, you feel closer to people than you have before. 90% actually say that they feel closer. So there's
Wow.
some like data behind this. We really are making a difference in a way. And it really is because you're seeing somebody's face, you're seeing their reaction, but it's without having to schedule a time, the awkwardness of getting off the call. It's also in your natural environment. It's not like in this particular setup where, I make sure that the background looks good and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, it's in a flow of life. So in a
Mm-hmm.
flow of life, you get to see my kids running in and out. You get to see me in the mornings and throughout the day. And we get to really spend our times together in a way that we would if we were actually living together.
And how did you find the investor support for such a kind of purpose-driven organization? Because it doesn't sound like, oh, hey, we're going to build this thing and we're going to try and take it public in a couple years, and we're all going to be gazillionaires. It sounds very like, if I were an investor, like, well, I don't know what are they going to do? Like, they seem amazingly visionary, but also like, I got to get a return. How do you
Yeah.
how do you deal with the investors?
Well, the beauty is that our ambitions are pretty large. Like
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to have a huge impact in the world. Like the way, as I told you in the beginning, like for me, our time is the most scarce resource. I don't want to be spending time on small opportunities. So for us, we want to reach 1 billion people. We want to make that kind of impact in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very much aligned with the VC sized opportunity
Mm-hmm.
and investor opportunity. And also like, so that's sort of at the high level, how there's alignment. But secondary, just like with folks who are getting hired into the company, the first thing I talk about is our purpose with every single person, how important it is here, that if it's not something that's really energizing for them, then this will not be a good place for them, because we talk about our purpose ad nauseum, really.
Mm-hmm.
We did that with investors. So everybody who has invested in the company knows of our purpose. They know what our vision is. Every board meeting I start with is with our purpose and a testimonial from people who use our product. So we're always grounding back in the purpose. And I've been really fortunate. That combination of sort of setting a high level vision and combining with people who actually care about the way to get there has worked out for us.
You talk a lot about purpose. A lot of PM leads talk about customer problems, and they seem different. How do you see the difference?
I think when you say customer problem, it depends on the PM. Sometimes I think sometimes, and I think this can sometimes differentiate like a more junior PM from more senior PM. Sometimes a problem is something like a person says, "Here's my problem," or you see them struggling with X. But I think a purpose or something like a more senior person might say is like, what's underlying this? Like, what are they actually trying to do? So let me not fix this, potential usability issue or give them this thing that they're asking for. But it's like that Henry Ford. If I
Yeah,
ask
faster
people,
horse.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's that. So I think the purpose is sort of higher level than that. Because if you ask people, do you need another way to stay in touch? They'll say no. But if you talk to people, is it hard for you to stay in touch? Do you wish you could see your loved ones more? The answer is yes. Of course you want to be with your loved ones. And I'm not talking about, I think like it's important for this conversation to differentiate between sort of like the normal social media friends that people have. Like this Marco Polo is not for your 100 best friends. It's really for your 5, 10 people that you really want to have conversations with. Is it people, if they came to visit you, you would go through all the COVID protocols to see them. You would actually go out with them and hang out with them because they're an important part of your life. Anyways, I think that's the difference.
Yeah. And, when I hear you talk about the product, it's very thematic and mission driven and purposeful. I also know you to be a very analytical problem solver that is willing to kind of unpack things and go deep. How do you translate this higher vision and arc and turn that into stuff that engineers and designers can work on, and that we can have a roadmap around, and we feel like we're making progress and moving forward?
Yeah. So, are you asking at a very tactical level, or are you asking?
Yeah, like, because someone hearing this might be like, oh, well, Vlada seems like this new age kind of thoughtful person, but I know that you get stuff done and
Yeah.
you ship product, and there's the app that's on the store that's doing so well. Like, it didn't just happen from good feelings. It was a lot of kind of problem solving and kind of discovery. And I'm curious how you translate the broader mission into, like, what does the team do, month to month or week to week?
Yeah. Okay. So there is definitely some aspect of having a vision for the product. That's just for us. It comes from Miha and I, from talking to customers, from folks in the team. But there's some setting of the vision. But then how do we break that down? Is alignment. I think having alignment with the folks at the company, like what are we trying to accomplish this year, is really, really important. We've switched over to using the OKR system, which is objectives and key results. So everybody is aligned and what are the 3 most important objectives that we're trying to hit this year, and what are the key results for each one. And for us, the objectives stay the same all year long, and it's the key results that are changing underneath them. And of course, I say that, and probably we're going to change. And objectives are not going to stay the same because it's a startup, so things move. But we do have a system where it's really important that we align at a high level. What are the metrics we're trying to move, or what's a new thing we're trying to learn? And then everybody in the company sort of feeds into that.
Now, you mentioned using OKRs as something that you didn't do at the very beginning. What was the motivation for not doing it earlier, and why the change?
Yeah, I think earlier on we were changing so much. There was so much shifting that setting because OKRs, there is overhead involved
Yeah.
in I've been doing that. Like a lot of companies are going, yeah. Anyways, you know about OKRs. There's a lot of memes about OKRs. So just say that. So I think if you're in a stage of your company where things are changing pretty regularly and you don't know if you can't predict fully what the full year is going to look like, OKRs might not be the best place to be. But if you can sort of start reasoning out about things a couple years in advance, even 2 years in advance, a year in advance, I think OKR is a really good model.
Tell me more about, you mentioned hiring, that you make sure people know that it's a mission-driven place right out of the bat.
Yeah.
Tell me more about how you evaluate a new hire and decide if they're the right person, since it sounds like culture and values are really important, but you're also a high-performing organization and have done really well. So how do you pick people?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we do. So for every person that we hire, we have an interview plan, and we figure out who is responsible for what, and each person is responsible for evaluating them both on our values, but also on their skills. Because somebody could obviously be great for culture, but if they don't have the skills, they can't execute at a high level, then it's not going to be a fit. And so we use that. And then the other thing that we do that works really well for us is we actually have everybody go through a project.
Mm.
So once they meet folks on a team, we then have a paid project that everybody goes through, and it can be, last from a few hours to up to, I think, 10 hours or something like that. But it's really the goal is really to get a chance to know each other.
Yeah.
You really see what it's like to work together. And during that time, we can see if this is the kind of person who is a self-starter. Are they curious? Are they asking the questions we wanted to be asking? Did they go dark? And then come back with a perfect solution, and then like all kinds of things come out once you're actually working on a project together. And that's been really, I think, a really important piece of our hiring strategy here.
How often do you see big discrepancies between the performance during the traditional interview process versus what you see in the project?
I would say about 30% don't make it past the project phase.
Wow. So 30% of the time, someone who does really well on the interviews is actually after the project phase, you're like, oh no, that's
Yeah.
not going to work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And for us, we really invest in the people who work at the company.
Hmm.
Like we take every hire very, very seriously. So
Yeah.
we're not the kind of people who are like, oh, well, let's give them a try for a month. If it doesn't work out, we're just going to let them go. No problem. Like that's just not our culture. And
Mm.
that's just not how I work. So for us, it's like really important that people that we commit to, we're really committing with them. So once they're here, we work with them, and if there's any issues, we really try to help with performance management, things like that. So hiring the right people has been really important. And as a result, our attrition is very low because we tend to be so thoughtful in our hiring process. And the people who want to work here are incredibly purpose driven that they stay, So we
Yeah.
have people who've been here. We have several people next year, they'll be there 10 years.
Wow.
And being here for more than 5 years it's not that new. Lots of people here for more than 5 years, which is unheard of in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, seriously. It's
Yeah.
like an entire career for some
Yeah.
people. Tell me a little bit about how that process, do you think it will, I mean, clearly it's scaled. You have, I think on LinkedIn it says around 60 employees. Um, do you think that will still work? Like, because it seems like it does add a lot to the hiring process, that it's the throughput would be impacted, and maybe some candidates maybe, hey, I've got an exploding offer, or I'm talking to 5 other places. Like, how does that work out with sort of getting the right numbers and landing people?
Yeah, for sure. And especially in today's market, it's definitely where it's like so difficult to hire the right
Hmm.
people. Um, for us, the way we run the process after each person, we actually have a reflection to see how the process could have gone better. Was there opportunity for us to speed it up some way? And we sort of like have a continuous improvement loop on the
Hmm.
process. And it's everything from changing the questions in the interview that we're asking to be tighter, to shortening the project so that do we really need them to do this other piece? Can we get the information just from this piece? So the answer is yes, it will definitely change.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time imagining us dropping the project because there's so much value in getting it. The information we're getting from it is so valuable. And even if it does cost us some candidates in the front, I think we make up for it by having low attrition and having people who come through. Because we also find that for the right people, doing a project with us is actually what they want to do too.
Right.
Right. Because they don't want, it's as much for them as it is for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the right person, it's really like, oh, it's a de-risking because I want to be with this company for the next few years. I don't want to just go for a year. I want to make sure I land in the right place. So I think it ends up working out where that friction works well for
like a self-selection.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
if you're somebody who's going to be hopping in every year, then this is probably not a good thing for you to do.
Yeah.
You should go somewhere where it's easier for you to get a job and then you can easily move on.
So let's say Marco Polo is hiring for a mid-career product manager.
Yeah.
What are you, before they even get to the project, and you're just thinking about whether they should have a, initial interview, what do you look for?
So we're actually looking for PMs, and we're also looking for director of product. So anybody who's listening, please do apply. I'm turning your
I know we're turning into a job ad.
We're hiring across the board, so for sure apply. Not just PMs, but growth and analytics and engineers. So for us, we look for a few things. You mean just from the resume perspective?
Yeah, for a PM. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All joking aside, but also joking, making sure there's no typos in your resume, that would be great, because I have been surprised at how often at 4 p.m. that there are spelling errors or typos. So please definitely look through it. Not that it's a definite no right away, but it definitely raises a question mark in my mind, at least. The other thing we look for is, depending on the seniority, we often do look for somebody who has some experience in consumer space, because I find that the kind of thinking and problem solving that happens in the consumer space can be very different from more like an enterprise space. I really like having folks who have some experience in the startup, because the speed is just very different with how you move. The speed and being flexible, being able to go with the ups and downs, I think is an important piece of the journey. So that's another thing that I look for at the resume. And then the last thing that's really important actually is I want somebody who highlights the impact they're having on the company, on the metrics and on the business. So it's not enough for me to know that you've been at YouTube, but what did you actually accomplish there? So what was your contribution to that project? Because the names of the companies alone don't say much. And I do look for folks who've been at companies for a while. I tend to prefer folks who've been somewhere for at least a few years, because then it's a chance for you to see a site project through, improve. It's also a chance to see, okay, have you actually made a difference at the company, or did you just ship a feature?
Right.
So there's lots of things that happen that way as well.
What's your take on education? What kind do you look for, a particular kind of education, or is it a factor? Like how do you think about that?
I love non-traditional backgrounds. For me, I think it actually brings me joy to find people who have non-traditional backgrounds who are applying for the companies. I find that folks like that have a lot of hustle. They're usually very scrappy, resourceful, creative. So I love having people. So for me, education piece is not the number one. It's not number one criteria at all, actually. And also, Tom, for us, like part of our purpose drivenness, we also do want to use our jobs as opportunity, as like another way to give back. So we do look for folks that we can actively provide opportunities for. So we specifically look for folks actually with non-traditional backgrounds to see if we can to help them out.
Yeah. And when the project comes for a PM, what are as much as you can share, like what are the competencies, or what are the things that you're trying to assess for?
Yeah, and I think it's there's a few things. For sure, we want somebody who has humility and curiosity. I think those are really important characteristics as a PM. Because if you're coming in and you already think you know all the answers, chances are you're going to end up with the wrong solution. You're laughing, makes me think that you've maybe ran across a few folks like that. Or
Once or twice.
Yeah. I think empathy for the customer, and that's related to the humility and curiosity piece. I think that's really, really important. So those are kind of like the softer skills.
Mhm.
And then very tactically, I want somebody who can translate what we are saying as a business goal into, okay, what that person thinks it means for the team. Like what are they like, and actually show their thinking and how they think, like why this translates into will actually help move the business forward. I want somebody who shows clear communication. So, that they're communicating, again, not going dark, regularly letting us know how the project is going and how they're thinking about stuff. So the why behind their thinking. It's not so much, again, the project's not so much that we're going to then use it for our company. It's more a chance for us to see how the person works and how they think. And if they're not communicating along the way, that's not good. And then the other thing is, as much as we can, the project state, see like how reliable they are and how self-starter they are. So if you say you're gonna follow up on this date, are they actually following up? Do they need us to ping them to remind them to show up at the meeting, or are they actually showing? I mean, it's funny, but it's actually interesting because there's a lot of skills involved in just managing a small project.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, those are just a few things.
And what do you think of, what's your position on technical background and technical skills for your PMs?
We don't prioritize that as much. So for
Why
us,
not?
because for me, I think like from technical perspective, if you're a good communicator and you're somebody who can sort of be a critical thinker, even without having a computer science background, you can ask enough questions of your engineering counterpart to understand how things can and can't work. So I think like experience in a consumer space sort of gets you enough that you don't need to have like necessarily education in computer science.
And so that's like, there is another school of thought that's like, oh, the CS undergrad and then MBA from another place is a good combo, but you're not in that. You don't subscribe to that one.
Yeah, I really value experience, like their work experience, I think, more than educational experience.
You also mentioned consumer PM and enterprise PM very different, that they were different. Can you talk a little bit about how they're different, especially for PMs maybe earlier in their careers? They're thinking about which should they focus on. What's your take on that? Or if they should focus on one at all. Maybe they do a bunch of things. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, well, it depends on the person. I would say that the thing that I see different is usually the speed to market is very different between consumer space versus like an enterprise space. And I think also access to customer research is different as well. Like if you're an enterprise world, you have paying customers and they're usually pretty big corporations. So getting somebody's time to do a usability study or research, it just takes longer and it's more work and it can be more expensive. Also, those companies tend to move slower on adapting your latest feature or technology. So all those things you have to take in consideration. On the other hand, it's kind of cool to work with big companies. So if that interests you, great. For me, I've always been a consumer gal. I really love how quickly you can iterate. I love that I can, like we used to go to Starbucks and just like buy a bunch of $5 gift cards. And I would just, as people were in line waiting for coffee, I would show them our app and get their feedback on the usability of things, and just give them like, can I buy a cup of coffee? And you can't do that if you're working with enterprise companies, So, and I think there's like a level of scrappiness that you can have with consumer space. So that's the reason why we look for folks who already have some consumer experience, because I think it's harder for me to judge. Is it that they weren't scrappy, or is it because it's enterprise that it's actually like was harder for them to do certain things that I would expect the PM to be able to do, like Starbucks usability study?
Yeah. Did the Starbucks people ever give you any grief for kind of
They did.
go away?
Yeah. I like would change locations, or sometimes I'd wait to make sure it's like a different barista.
Yeah, that's great.
Or like I would wait outside. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Vlada, I want to talk a little bit about.
So sorry, I was buying them coffee, so I don't think they should have been very mad at me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you're giving them like a Phil's gift card or
Yeah.
something, right? Yeah.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about your reflection on your career. I mean, it's so interesting. You went from Microsoft to entrepreneur and now CEO of a company, and managing a board, as well as being a mom and a wife, and staying married through a startup with a co-founder as your spouse. Like that's amazing, by the way. Just I think that's incredible. What are some lessons that you've learned along the way that have contributed to your success as a leader?
That's a good question, Tom. Well, the first one you shared earlier, I think purpose really makes a big difference. I think the second one is how important alignment is. And when I speak about alignment, I mean really across the board. So I spoke to this before in terms of investors, people who are hired here, how everybody needs to be aligned, but also business model needs to be aligned. Like if we're saying we're purpose driven and our purpose to help people feel close, let's make sure that the money we make is aligned with our purpose and not secondary to our purpose, So I think having everything be aligned with what we're trying to accomplish in the world has created like a really powerful and strong foundation for us as a company, and I think for me as a leader. So when I do talk at the board and I do talk to the company, there's not something that feels off.
Right.
Everything is in integrity, So that's been really important. I think that the next thing I would say is I've learned that there's no one right way to lead. Different people have different leadership styles, and honestly, it took me a while to see that. I really, because what gets shown over and over is usually a particular stereotype of what a CEO of a company looks like, especially with that company. And let me tell you, it doesn't look like me. So for a long time, I didn't even know if I could do this job, because I honestly never saw anybody who looked like me who would be doing this job. And so it took a while for me to feel like it's a job I can step into. But now, like, I can really see how there are so many different ways to lead. There's no right and wrong way. It's really individual, and it depends on people around you can really support your leadership style. And I tend to lead from the heart. Like my leadership style is being me, is being authentic and being open to what's going on for me. And I think as the result, I have a very close relationship with people who work with me directly, but also with people at the company. And so I think that's really created the sense of we really are all in this together that I haven't experienced in other places. And I think that has felt very special. Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say, at least it feels like the last thing I'll say, is I think it's important to hold a high bar for yourself and for the people around you. I think if you hold a high bar, people rise to it. And I think that sometimes it can feel uncomfortable to say, no, let's rise. Let's do more than we can do. But I think, again, given the purpose, alignment, and this culture, that raising the bar can actually feel really uniting and powerful in the way that somewhere else might feel like, oh, my manager is trying to get me to do more and it doesn't feel good, So I think holding a high bar for the people here and saying like, no, our purpose is really important. We're going to have a very effective team actually brings people closer together and makes people work harder, but not less joyful. So okay, yeah, I think those are the things I'd say.
Those are words to live by. I love it. And I think we will end the interview on that note because yeah, hopefully
Right.
people will think about Vlada's advice and check out Marco Polo, who is hiring across the board. So marcopolo.me, or you can play around with the app on your mobile phone. And thank you so much, Vlada. I know you're super busy, and it's such a joy to have this chat with you.
It's awesome to be here. Anytime, Tom. I really loved it. Thank you so much.
See you later, Vlada. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.